I'm sorry I'm standing way back here, but the cord is only as long as it is. But I want to thank Carla for putting me in, and an HDMI connection would make the audio-visual stuff work. And I want to thank you all for inviting me to talk. I want to thank Adam for inviting me to be a lion. And it all really goes to how grateful I am to be welcomed by this community as a guy who dreamed of Route 66 when I took the road trip 10 years ago, 11 years ago, but wasn't quite sure that I would ever wind up here the way I am now. And it's a very exciting thing that I get to do this. So I've got this project I want to update you on, the who, what, and why, because the who is me, and I realize that although you see me and maybe you get a sense of who I am, you don't really know my story, which really has driven this project, like the seeds and the germination of this idea really comes from my life. And I literally wouldn't be here if it wasn't for my mom, and that's her and me when I was about 10 years old, which was actually a critical time in my life because she did something to save me psychologically from being abused by my father, which was actually kind of a daily occurrence. It's not a happy story, and I'm not really looking for sympathy because, frankly, what I've learned as an adult is the things that happen they happen for a reason. And even if they're not always something that brings a smile to your face, they can sometimes sensitize you to ideas and give you give your eyes an open view of the world that really helps eventually. So that's my mom, who took care of me as a child in the face of all the craziness at home. And then this is, I wouldn't be here in Stroud if it wasn't for Dawn Welch being so welcoming when I came through here the first time. And that was me giving her a poster for the Friends of Steve McQueen charity car show in California that I was headed for on that road trip. That was, I believe, 2012. So I'm sorry Dawn isn't here, but maybe she'll get to see the video because I really am so grateful for her kindness. Just seeing this guy show up at the Rock, and it was like, you helped create Sally the Porsche new car. Yep. So another wonderful woman I've interacted with. And so again, what is the seeds of my project is that first off, I'm autistic, and that makes me a little socially awkward. And by the way, I didn't even know I was autistic until 10 years ago when I was diagnosed by a professional speech coach who was trying to help me learn to give better speeches, because I was always a little stiff. And I went to this professional, she said, you know why you're stiff? It's because your social skills are a product of being autistic. But the thing that I learned once I started learning about autism is that you can usually have some kind of a special thing you get passionate about, and it's like it can just fixate you. And you can also sometimes have like a unique talent. And in my case, I remember taking a test when I was little, which was all about matching patterns. You know, like if A is like B, then C is like what? And I turned out to be really good at seeing patterns, shape patterns, number patterns. And this world peace thing that is my passion came, again, it's like the accidents of life. I'm 7 years old. I've had 7 years of just being in a pretty difficult childhood environment. And my school takes the whole class to the UN, because I grew up in New York, and the UN was just across town. So they stick us in a bus, all of a sudden we're at the UN, we spend a day learning that world peace is like a job. All these people in this fancy building have this job. And I was shocked and excited. And you know, autistic kids, they don't talk much, and I didn't talk hardly at all. But I come home from this class trip and I couldn't stop talking. I'm like, oh my God, UN, world peace, and it was a big deal. So it kind of wired me up to see that this thing called peace wasn't just like a dream. It was a thing people were working on, and it has stuck with me, even though I didn't have like an orientation to go into politics or into what is it called, to become a diplomat. Again, autism. You're kind of sheltered, and the child abuse piece added to the autism did get me asking certain questions, but I really wasn't quite sure what to do with this as a life direction. But here I am, and I finally figured things out after a lot of ups and downs. And the thing that it got me thinking, because my father was not a good guy, he was very abusive, not just to me and my sister, but also to my mom, was I literally from like the earliest memories, there has to be something better. I've been asking myself this question forever. There has to be something better. I'm always looking for what's better. I'm always trying to learn. I'm always trying to explore, because I want to see that there's more that we can have than is in front of me. And childhood was nasty, so I wanted to definitely see something better than that. And what helped me, putting aside that surprise trip to the UN, was television. So those of you now understand I have this love of Clark Kent and Superman. I can even dress up like Clark Kent. That's because literally the first thing that I saw that wasn't just like a one-shot go to the UN thing was the Adventures of Superman TV show from the 1950s that I was watching in reruns on local television. And there were people who were good to each other. They were helping each other. One guy was really helping each other because he was Superman. But you know, contrasted again with my family, where nobody was helping anybody. Well, no, I shouldn't say that. My mom was trying to help, but she was also kind of, you know, she was like terrified. So it was tricky for her. But it made me want to do something that would make a difference. I didn't quite know what I would do, but again, I knew that being a hero and helping people was a good way to be, and it's like, you know, life hands you difficult things. Sometimes you don't have any choice, but then sometimes life hands you surprising things that you weren't looking for. Quickly, there was a guy I knew as an architect. I was a civil engineer working at the Army Corps of Engineers, my first job out of college. He walks up to me one day and he said, I think you might find this book interesting. It was written by a scientist, philosopher, architect named Buckminster Fuller. The book was called Operating Manual for Spaceship Earth. And on the cover was this structure called a geodesic dome. I didn't know who Buckminster Fuller was. It was a weird sounding name. I didn't know what a geodesic dome was, but the architects knew about geodesic domes. And this book literally said, science has figured out how to do more with less. That was one of his phrases. And more with less means we can actually give everybody their basic needs instead of the fight over limited resources that most of society was organized around. Like if you ever saw the movie 2001: The Space Odyssey, at the beginning they show the caveman era and everybody's fighting over a watering hole because there's not enough water. That's kind of like reality until you learn the science that says we could do more with less, and now there'd be enough water for everyone, and now there'd be enough, all the basics. And to see that in my 20s triggered the memories of going to the UN and got me wondering, oh, maybe there's something I can do with my interest in science that can help someday. Again, I didn't have all the answers, but I had this question in my brain that I just couldn't let go of. What can I do to make a difference? And I tried to do some things, and I made mistakes, and I learned. I gave this talk 10 years ago because I loved the space program. That also gave me hope as a kid because we were going to the moon, and I was watching Walter Cronkite. And 10 years ago, there was a conference on the future of space run by a lady who had been an astronaut, Dr. Mae Jemison. And the fun thing about Dr. Jemison was she had been recruited to NASA by Nichelle Nichols from Star Trek. They had become friends, and so she had a Star Trek connection in addition to a NASA connection, which is me, because I was watching us go to the moon, and I was watching Star Trek in 1966. So it's, like I say, there are things that you plan and there are things that you don't plan. I show up at this conference, and there's this whole Star Trek piece in addition to NASA. So here's what I'm working to build. A place that can help make things better. I originally thought I was going to champion better journalism, but as I've been here for almost a year, I've realized that if it's all journalism all the time, that's not the full spectrum. And I love journalism, I love Clark Kent, but I want to be as inclusive as I can be. So instead of saying, okay, this is the Stroud Journalism Museum, I'm now kicking around some different ideas, and I'd actually like to get your feedback, because I thought, and I know Pastor Ben heard me say once, I was going to call it the Stroud Planetary Peace Center. But I don't want to say, oh, everybody should be thinking world peace. That might be what I've been thinking about since I was 7, but I want to be inclusive. I don't want to be, saying, oh, it's got to be, world peace or nothing. I want people to think of what they are interested in that can make a difference, not just what I am interested in that can make a difference. I want it to be a dialogue. I want it to be back and forth. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to feature Superman and Clark Kent. I'm going to feature the space program. When you walk into this building after the welcome desk, there's going to be a big open space, 2 rooms combined, and when you walk in the beginning, you're going to see NASA stuff, and then towards the back of this big space, 9 by 18, you're going to see Star Trek stuff, and there'll be some other things in there from the entertainment world, like Jimmy Stewart, and Charlton Heston from First Planet of the Apes movie. It's going to be the things that have inspired me as a starting point to talk about what inspires everybody. I want to collect people's stories about what gives them hope, not just have it be about what gives me hope. So I want to engage people in a conversation. And if they're feeling like they don't have as much hope as they wish they could have, I'll try to point out some things that could help them. Because frankly, even though it's not in the news, there's a lot of stuff out there. If you know where to look. There are, again, science people who are figuring stuff out. They don't get in the news, sadly. Maybe occasionally CBS Sunday Morning will profile somebody, but it's not regular. And there's, there'll be resources. And I want to first give people a place to talk about, being hopeful, and then I also want to invite them to think in terms of how we can get the whole of America and the whole, even maybe of the world, thinking hopeful and working towards that. Because Route 66, I love the tourism piece of Route 66. We have connections to not just the whole country, but we get people from all over the world here. So I want to use the tourism side of all this. Now, again, if people want some hope, I'm going to offer them the values I've figured out to live by. I'm not going to run through these because it's like a lot of information. But I do have certain principles. Curiosity, don't be into hate and fear, find hope. Always be asking how things be better. Know that community matters, which I'm not even all that good at because of the autism thing. But now that I'm here and I'm in a wonderful church, I'm working to be more social, despite the fact that it doesn't come easy. But I'm going to show Len. Len's been wanting to see my building, so Len and I are going to go over there afterwards. Leverage your outside interests, like Star Trek and NASA. Be bold, go boldly, and know that you matter. And the know that you matter part, I'll just briefly say that I had an insight around last Christmas. Another piece of the puzzle fell into place because there was I didn't talk much as a kid. And one time I did talk because I felt like frustrated, and my father was so insulted. His punishment was he didn't talk to me for 6 months. And he didn't even acknowledge that I existed for 6 months. I was I disappeared from his life. And I always wondered what was the long-term effect of this, and it finally snapped into place last December. That when your father acts like you're invisible, you start to wonder if you're invisible too. You start to wonder if maybe you're not really here, because who else is going to give you feedback? And I started to wonder whether I was here in my heart, even though I knew I was here in my head. And to make a long story short, I snapped out of that kind of head, heart broken, bond last December. I was like, wow, that's what that 6 months did? Okay, put that aside. Know that I am really here fully, head and heart, and move forward as a more fully realized sense. Sorry to get on the couch a little bit, but it's fascinating. Even at age 67, you can have insights and reach another level in your quest to do good. So what am I building? Well, I don't have a perfect name. I know it's not going to be the Stroud Journalism Museum. I know it's not going to be the Stroud Planetary Peace Center. But when we went to the moon, even though a lot of bad stuff was happening in the 60s, we got there, we did it. And it's called a moonshot. This is a term that isn't just going to the moon. If you're in the business world and you want to do something bold, sometimes it's called a Moonshot Project. And this phrase moonshot has been bouncing around in my head. And I think it could be a word that would resonate, and I want to get your feedback. I don't know whether it could be the Heartland Moonshot Place, or the Route 66 Moonshot Place in the window, Route 66 Moonshot. I'm not 100% sure. I'd like to get any thoughts you have, again, on Heartland Moonshot, Project Moonshot, Route 66 Moonshot. I'm definitely going to have the Route 66 neon sign, but I don't know whether to. But I want people to think in terms of bold plans. Even just for yourself is important, but if you really want to get involved in something, a bold plan that's community oriented. And so why do this? Because we've got this chance to leverage tourism here. We have this notion that we're not here in Stroud, but in the country, we're so broken up into parts. And cooperation is such a powerful way to be. This man, W. Edwards Deming, taught cooperation to business people starting in World War II. And when he passed away in 1993, he did a talk about the power of cooperation. I still have a video clip that I like to show people, because this guy was a brilliant philosopher about how we can do more together than we can separately. Strength through diversity, which is a truism that again isn't so much operating in the world right now where we're all broken apart. And I'd like to help Stroud. I wanted to be known for how great it is. 2,600 people in 26 churches. There's something magical about that dynamic. I don't know that any other city has that ratio of churches, but it's amazing. And so there's some kind of a brand maybe that could be made out of that. Future programs and events, we can celebrate your heroes' birthdays, my heroes' birthdays. We can have a dress up as Clark Kent contest. We can have a dress up as Walter Cronkite contest. We can, astronaut dress up. We can have a lot of fun with this. This is not just, super serious. It's going to be fun. How can it not be? Because Star Trek and all that other stuff. And I have this thought because they just passed this legislation, the Oklahoma Route 66 Commission. They had to override the governor's veto, but they passed it. It's like $6.6 million in funding every year. What happens if, after my place gets up and running, and of course, sorry, that's the building. What happens if after this gets up and running, we find a way, and there's that wonderful gentleman, now there I go with names again, from Seminole State College, that's Danny Morgan. What if Danny Morgan helps us put a pitch that would have us build something bigger than the storefront? What if we found some land? I know there was some land for sale on the way to Williams. I don't know what other land there might be. But we we've got till 2026 for the centennial. Maybe we could announce it. I don't know. This is just, keep going forward, keep thinking big. Imagine Route 66's town of Radiator Springs is recreated just insofar as the two characters of Sarge, the World War II Jeep, and Fillmore, the hippie bus, who had polar opposite attitudes towards life, but were friends. And I even saw a video clip from the movie that showed that Fillmore was selling organic fuel, and I think he got Sarge to try some. Because I saw this clip where Fillmore says, "Hey man," hippie, and Sarge said, "Yeah man." So they were now saying the same language. It's just a great thought from that movie, and I don't know whether it's viable, but Danny Morgan might be able to help us because also, well, I don't want to think in terms of me not being here, but I just think in terms of it's Route 66. Sarge and Fillmore could be a part of our future. So I'd like to ask that you please pray that the renovations go smoothly on the building. I just discovered today that there might be some issues with the suspended ceiling. I'd like to present my plans to the Stroud Chamber, and I don't know how to organize a chance to speak there. I'd also like to present my plans to somebody at Stroud High School because I'd like to involve the kids in some appropriate way, and I can't figure out what that is until I talk to the school about it. And lastly, the space program piece of Oklahoma, again, I didn't know it when I moved here, but I've learned about the guy who wrote the code for the computers. He's from Oklahoma, and there's a guy who is from Hollywood who loves the space program as much as me because he made the movie Apollo 13, and then he went on to do a TV documentary about us going to the moon called Earth to the Moon. That's Tom Hanks. And I want to end my talk with a clip. When Tom Hanks did the Earth to the Moon, he won an Emmy. And when he won the Emmy, he said something really special, and it's about a 1-minute clip. So here's Tom Hanks. Let's see if we can get this to play. Come on, you played earlier.
And the Emmy goes to From the Earth to the Moon.
From the Earth to the Moon has received a total of 17 Emmy nominations this year. Speaking for From the Earth to the Moon is executive producer Tom Hanks.
Very special thanks. Look at these hardworking people who are still coming to the stage. Special thanks to Andy Chaikin, who wrote A Man on the Moon, on which our series is based. David Scott, a man who was on the moon and was on our set every day as our advisor. We were able to dramatize a period piece, 30 years old, about 40,000 people in every state of the Union working towards one common goal and achieving the impossible. Something so impossible, it was considered madness to consider it for thousands upon thousands of years. Imagine what problems we could solve and the ills that we could cure if we chose to live the same way the people of Apollo did in the 1960s. Thank you, and God bless America.
So that's what we had, and I'd like to help us have it again in my small little humble way. But again, it's like you leverage what you've got. And now I've got this wonderful town to be part of, wonderful people, and hopefully I can get some kind of a conversation going locally and eventually with all of Route 66, the Route 66 tourism network, and then eventually maybe even the international Route 60. There's actually something called the International Institute for Peace Through Tourism. There are tourism people who have figured out the more we travel and the more we learn from each other, the less likely we are to go to war because we start to find out what we've got in common, even if we don't technically have like the same language. It's a great movement out there in the tourism world, and maybe they can help So, thank you for listening. I'd like to please answer any questions you've got, hear any questions you've got, I'll try to answer them. And thank you, Adam, for the video. Questions, comments? What do you think of the Moonshot title?
You know, they moonshots, I imagine the local bars will fix some drinks for them. Hey, there you go.